For years, I have told myself a Hobgoblin KHANATE race will never happen. Don't get your hopes up, and mostly I still think that's the case. When I started planning, researching, and writing for my Chaos Dwarf series, I was working on a video for a Hobgoblin subrace faction that might get a legendary character or two. Even then, I started seeing that there's more to work with there than I had previously thought. After the comments on my legendary characters video, it seems that there is a staunch demand from my viewers for a proper Hobgoblin KHANATE race. Against my better judgment, I've decided to let loose the floodgates and theorycraft Hobgoblins as an entire race. Now, if this did happen, I imagine it to be a similar situation to CA creating lore for the Vampire Coast. Games Workshop is going to be too preoccupied with Old World and Kislev, Cathay, Chaos Dwarves, and probably in Koresh and Dogs of War to work on Hobgoblins. That being said, I think this is a great area for Games Workshop to let CA go hog wild again, seeing as the Vampirates became one of the most beloved races in Game 2. Maybe it could be, I think, Great Book of Grudges said, maybe it could be a free race like Bretonnia. I would certainly love to have a free race. I think it would be a nice boon to all the fans who have stuck along with the game for, all these years, since, like, 2016 or whatever. Now, you might say, well, Redbeard, we already have a Greenskins and Hobgoblins are in the Chaos Dwarf roster to some extent. How would the KHANATE roster be anything new and different? Oh, well, let me stop you right there. The primary answer to that is the Hobgoblin KHANATE is a cavalry-focused race. Bretonnia is to the Empire, as Hobgoblins are to Greenskins. Though, due to Hobgoblin's connection to Chaos Dwarves, may be able to wield some gunpowder. But that may only be through ROR units and not any generic units. They are closer to Chaos than most Greenskins, as their two main locations are the Hordes of the Eastern Steppes and the Slaves of the Darklands. But I don't expect that Chaos will affect their roster or mechanics in any meaningful way, due to the fact that Greenskins are highly resistant to the influence of Chaos, and any Chaos-mutated creature in their ranks would likely be culled quickly. So, I have some other ideas based on existing Warhammer lore and actual world history, particularly around the Mongol Empire, and Genghis Khan and all that, which the Hobgoblins are based off. I'll talk more about that near the end of the video, but for now, we really just have to understand what Tengrism is. Tengrism is an ethnic and old state Turco-Mongolic religion originating in the Eurasian steppes based on folk shamanism, animism, and generally centered around the titular sky god Tengri. Tengri was not considered a deity in the usual sense, but a personification of the universe. So why is this important? I think Hobgoblins might replace Gork and Mork with their own deities that come from the eastern steppes. The two main deities in Tengrism are Tengr-Etzeg, also known as Tengri, who is the Heavenly Father, and Gazar-Ish, or Esh, the Earth Mother. Perhaps these two could replace Gork and Mork in a Hobgoblin Law mechanic. More importantly, we know Hobgoblin shamans can summon wind demons through the lore of spirits, which I believe would tie nicely with a Warhammer take. So, let's entertain the idea that we might get a Hobgoblin race. I've never thought it to be very likely, but after making this video, I think I'm on the bandwagon, for sure. Plus, this helps me in this series fill out the last slot I had not landed on yet in my quest to detail out 7 races to fill out the race selection screen. So who makes our Lords and Heroes roster? There are 5 named Hobgoblin characters and 1 semi-named character in fantasy lore. Gordas, I've already discussed with Chaos Dwarves and think that is where he belongs, as he is a hero in the army book. Hobgoblin is a title, not a name. The current Hobgoblin is referenced, but never given a unique name or story. Morkar Khan and Kangai Khan both have names and stories, but are technically dead at this point. Morkar Khan being the founder of the Empire, he's long dead. And Kangai Khan being the former Hobgoblin Khan, who managed to die of old age, which is exceedingly rare. Let's assume Morcar is long dead and maybe he has returned by way of mastery of the lore of spirits and can be our ethereal shaman lord. Then let's probably fudge time and see Kengai is not dead yet, and maybe he's the current Hobgoblin. They can both start in or near the eastern steppes. But also, maybe, if we wanted to give Hobgoblin, the current one, his own unique name, then perhaps we could put Kengai Khan and Morcar Khan into one faction based on the lore of spirits and maybe some ethereal units. Then there's Gazek Khan and Ogla Khan, and they can act as our mercenary lords on far-flung missions, because there's definitely, there's more than just the slaves of the Dark Lands and the hordes of the Eastern Steppes. There's also bands of hobgoblins that break off with their KHANATE and become mercenaries, and they're most known to be in the Southern Realms area, but also you have attacked the Empire before. So, yeah. And those lords, Ogla and Gazak, can have something like ogre contracts or something along those lines. So for the key main mechanics, we would have a pseudo-horde for the Hobgoblin KHANATE, sort of like Nakai or the Vampirates or the Beastmen. Of course, they would probably get their own unique take on it, but they would definitely be, I mean, they're they're very specifically hordes. So, yeah, they would have that mechanic. They would have, I would assume they would have the wall mechanic. They are still greenskins at the end of the day, so they can definitely borrow. They get, like, this whole race can mostly borrow its mechanics from other races and be totally fine. For the most part, every race should have some sort of unique mechanic. But yeah, they can have a Wa. They might not have Gork and Mork as the two to pick from again. So for Tengrism, we have the heavenly. We have the one god who is the god of the air in the sky, and then we have the one god who is the god of land. So whatever they'd want to name them to be Warhammer, it'd just be based off Tengrism. But they could do whatever they want. I just think Tengrism is a Mongolic religion, so it'd be cool to base that off of that. They would have raiding camp stance like the Greenskins, so they could use all their movement and still land in a raiding camp. They could possibly borrow the slaves mechanic from like the Chaos Dwarfs and stuff, but I think maybe not. But if they end up being a sub race for Chaos Dwarfs, then they certainly would. And then going back to the Wa, they might have some unique units there. They would, because it's a hobgoblin race. It's different. It comes mostly from a different area, so they might have like feral hydras and feral wyverns still, but they might have unique stuff like squigodons or stonehorns or deathworms or dreadmaws, but I'll get more into that later. And then they might still have terrain based, so they might have like lava spiders still, but may also get like ice wolves or something, or saber tusk packs. And then another big part, so they would be a hybrid cavalry focus. So, like the Kislev is a hybrid race, but that's mostly focused on its infantry, right? So basically every single infantry has some sort of melee capability, but also some sort of range capability. Now, then we have Bretonnia, which is a cavalry-based roster. So imagine kind of mixing those two ideas together, and that's what I imagine the Hobgoblin race should feel like to make sure that it's unique and loreful. Meaning it would be a cavalry-based faction that can basically all their units can basically go melee or ranged. So like all the named Hobgoblin lore characters all have basically the same weapon set. They have a spear, a scimitar, a shield, and a bow. Like, every single one of them, that's what they have. Obviously, we can get a little more unique than that, I think, when we rewrite the lore up for the game. But, point being, hybrid cavalry-focused faction, or race, I should say. But so here's another part of that. So I absolutely think, because every single character, again, Morkar Khan, Kangai Khan, Gazek Khan, Ogla Khan, Gorda's Backstabber. Well, actually, Gorda's doesn't have a bow, but every character has a wolf mount. So I think every Hobgoblin Khan and like Big Boss and any Beastmaster, Lord, or Hero, maybe not the Shamans, but basically every character should start with a wolf mount. Now, again, keep in mind, the wolves for the Hobgoblin race are from the steppes. So these are not the same puny, basically pointless wolves we see in the Greenskin race with their wolf riders. So I think there would be several different types of wolves, probably. But their starting wolf would be the size of a horse, which the goblin wolf riders, their wolves are a bit, the giant wolves are a bit smaller. So we could have like younger steppe wolves, and then older steppe wolves, kinda, as two different mounts. So the ones that are younger, like the horse sized, and that's the mount that everybody would start with. And then maybe, you get into something like ice wolves or lava wolves. We'll get more into that later. And then last thing for mechanics before we go into the unique lore that Hobgoblins might have, scrap upgrades. So scrap upgrades, it could be just like greenskins, but another part, so that, again, hybrid cavalry race, but they would also have a bit of a focus on monsters and repurposed gunpowder. Sort of how Skaven do it, but not nearly as advanced. Like, they should absolutely not be focused on gunpowder as a race. It's just kind of another feature. So, and with scrap upgrades, maybe like something kind of unique to the Hobgoblin race is that maybe they could, like, certain units could upgrade their bows to rifles or, something along those lines, where they, change out their weapon set with the scrap upgrades. I don't know, I'm just thinking of ideas. Okay, so for the unique lore of magic we could get the lore of spirits. This comes from the tabletop game for Hobgoblins, and I've just repurposed it for how it might work in Total War. So, for the lore of spirits, we have Defeat Disease Spirit, which is a cheap spell, a buff spell. You can target one ally, and they are immune to all contact effects for 45 seconds to a minute if the spell is upgraded. Maybe it costs 4 winds of magic, and if it's upgraded, maybe 8 winds of magic. A Fire of Vengeance. So this would be probably your default spell. It's just a magic missile, like a green fireball, maybe. Maybe it's not actually fire, but like a green, like a spirit ball, whatever. I don't know. Just a magical missile. And maybe that costs 6 winds of magic, and yeah, maybe 10 if upgraded or something. Then we have Message of Doom, which has a moderate cost. It's a debuff spell. You can target an enemy character and their leadership is reduced by -16, and immune to psychology is also removed. It would pair great with Gorda's Backstabber and other Hobgoblin cons and big bosses, where you maybe are dueling an enemy lord or hero, and you pop that spell on them, and then they're losing a ton of leadership at that point. Maybe -16 is too little. Maybe it could be negative 25 or something leadership. That would probably be a little more useful at that amount of Winds of Magic. And maybe it doesn't have to be just on a character. Maybe you can put this on any unit. But if it's on units, then maybe negative 16 is good. Spirit Shield. So Spirit Shield has a moderate to high cost. Has a 35 meter radius and an augment spell. So probably like 11 plus 11 Winds of Magic. Maybe if it's upgraded, it's like 14 or I don't know, something along those lines. You would target any allies within its radius, and they would gain 400 to 600 barrier for 30 seconds or 45 if it's upgraded. Spirit Staff has a moderate cost. Is a buff spell. Targets units in a 25 meter radius. Augment spell. It targets any allies within radius, and they gain magical attacks and frenzy. And again, 12 Winds of Magic. If it's upgraded, 16 or something, to 15 maybe. And maybe that just increases the radius of the spell. Maybe it pushes it to 35 meters instead of 25 meters. Spirit's Voice. So, for this one, this is where it gets pretty interesting. So, you could maybe summon a Wind Demon. In its regular form, it's just a leadership buff for allies. In tabletop, that's how it would translate. But I say let's use it as an inspiration to justify a Wind Demon summon, which I'll get into what a Wind Demon is in the units. But you can imagine. Maybe change it to Wind Spirit to justify the unit being ethereal. Summons last for a limited time and would be capped at 2 when upgraded. So you can summon 1 or 2 if it's or I don't know. I'm sorry. Suppose you wouldn't upgrade the spell. It would be in the skills. So you tag it once, you get 1 summon. Tag it twice, you get 2 summons, and then third tag maybe just reduces the cost. And then for the last thing, the lore attribute. So the Bane of Malevolence. So for this one, you could get a little creative with it. It's the Lore of Spirits. Disable, and then we're looking at Tzeentch and other demons in the north and the eastern steppes. So maybe it disables enemy barriers for casting duration. Now that wouldn't be very good up against any faction that doesn't have any barriers, which is most of them. But so it maybe has that feature map wide, but also the caster gains barrier. Now, maybe that's still not useful enough. Maybe the caster in the leadership aura gives allies barrier, and maybe it's only in that aura that enemies' barriers are also disabled for a short duration after any spell is cast, maybe 10-15 seconds. That is my interpretation from the tabletop. Obviously, it doesn't work. These spells don't work exactly like that in tabletop. I'm just translating how I think it would work in Total War. So we will cut this video there. I will continue to talk about Hobgoblins in part 2, which will ultimately be the more interesting video, because I'm going to talk about the lords, the heroes, the roster in general. So, absolutely stay tuned for that. Shouldn't be too long after this video. We'll see what happens. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subbing if you have. If you haven't, show a brother some love. Alright. Yeah, part 2. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.